All right. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John. It's time for another Motorweek Retro Review reaction. And I'll be honest with you, I was all ready to do another vehicle. And this video just popped up. It is the 1983 Chevy Citation X11. And I've just got to do it because the Citation launched this channel. If you haven't been here for a long time, go back and check my earliest videos. A lot of junk. They're really bad, I admit that. But I had a video where I said something like the Chevy Citation killed GM. Something like that. And I believe that. While I've had a lot of comments around it, that the Vega was a problem, the W bodies, the 864, the Oldsmobile diesel, whatever it happens to be, I still believe the Citation encapsulates everything that was wrong with GM in the 70s and the 80s. Management arrogance, they assigned different pieces of the car to different divisions. It never came together. They feel like they rushed it out. Poor quality, poor build, building it too fast. And I think it is still the most recalled car in history. But for all of that, it was a really good concept. And I've had multiple people who've been like, hey, these things are pretty cool and really sporty if you get the right setup. So I'm excited to see what Motorweek says about the 83 X11. So, as always, grab your beverage of choice, sit in your comfy chair, and let's take a little trip down memory lane.
Motorweek is made possible by Lucas Oil, Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper, and TireRack.com.
You know, there's been a lot written about the GM X car, and lately most of it hasn't been too good. That makes it harder to remember that when it came out, everybody said it was a milestone in American automotive design. At the time, we saw an array of sedans and hatchbacks that were full of modern front-drive technology. It looked so good on paper that all of GM's mainstay divisions got a copy. Out popped the Pontiac Phoenix, the Buick Skylark, and the Olds Omega. And they were led by the front-running Chevrolet Citation. But long before that first year's 1.1 million production was sold, problems for the roomy compact began to loom. There were complaints that they were difficult to service and that they had leaking transmissions and premature locking brakes. That last problem is still making the headlines. But that was the 1980 X car. Since then, there have been a lot of improvements, all embodied in the car you see here. This is the 1983 high-performance Chevrolet Citation X11, and here are the details.
Well, and that's really good summary. Fantastic, actually. This was released, and, you know, it's interesting because the K cars from Chrysler, they get a lot of credit for bringing a four-door front-wheel drive, unibody, modern interpretation of what the Japanese were doing in a fuel-efficient package. But the X bodies beat them to the market. The problem is they were so troublesome. Well, a lot of that got fixed as the years went on, and this platform later got stretched and pulled and became like the Chevy Celebrity, things like that. And it ended up being a very serviceable platform, but that's part of the problem. Is it feels like they rushed it out without refining the details and without actually spending the money to fix problems. One of the most memorable quotes I heard is that driving an X body, right, a Citation, is like driving a tractor trailer, because the engine was so rough they had to put it on really soft motor mounts. So when you pressed the gas, the engine would flex and it would pull, and then it felt like the rest of the car was coming after it. They had a lot of problems, but they slowly sorted it out. But the problem is that every year, basically, their sales halved from the previous year. 800, 400, 200,000. Still staggering numbers. But what should have been a home run for them and really challenged the Japanese manufacturers ended up becoming an eyesore. Let's see what they say.
Let's give the best news first. The Citation X11 is one of the finest handling front-wheel drive cars you can buy. Right up there with the likes of the VW GTI and the Saab 900 Turbo. Heresy? Not at all. The power rack and pinion steering is quick and feels great. The stiffer springs and shocks of the X11's F41 suspension package and optional Eagle GT tires mean flat and fast transits through the switchbacks. And there's never a fear that the lightly loaded rear end will come unstuck.
You know, that's really strong to say that it's a fantastic handler. That's pretty strong. I'm a little shocked, as a matter of fact. I've always thought it handled pretty well, but that's a little stronger than I imagined it was going to be.
The smoothness of the car's response actually reminds us, heresy again, of such rear-drive performers as the Camaro Z28 and maybe even BMW. Don't believe it? Then look at how effortlessly the X11 takes a high-speed emergency maneuver, little twitch and lots of confidence. We were only slightly less enthusiastic about acceleration. The X11's power comes from the high-output version of Chevy's 2.8-liter V6. That means 135 horsepower, 20% more than the standard version. That yielded a very nice time of 17.5 seconds and a very healthy 80 miles per hour over the quarter mile. There is too wide of spacing between second and third and top gear, and a 5-speed would be a welcomed improvement. Still, we were very pleased with our on-ramp time to speed of only 9.2 seconds and 59 miles per hour over a 500-foot sprint. Other fine results included only 4.5 seconds to pass from 40 to 55 and a 0 to 60 run of 10.1 seconds. Truly, the X11 could hold its own even against much more brawny competition.
Really, wow, really strong. I mean, those numbers by today's standards seem terribly weak, but not bad, honestly. And the fact that they keep comparing it to stronger competitors is really interesting. I think I'll have more to say about that in a minute. Overall, 0 to 60 time seems okay, but when you think about some economy cars that were getting 13, 14 seconds, that's pretty strong. It really is. And let's see what else they say.
And speaking of holding power, despite early failures, the Citation now seems to have its braking problem solved, at least on the X11. Halts from 55 were confidence building. Good pedal pressure, no fade, and just a hint of rear wheel lockup and swing. Only 107 feet of pavement, on average, was needed to bring our 2,870-pound hatchback to a stop.
So 2,871, I think they said, pounds. That's extremely light. That's really impressive. I miss cars like that. 107 feet. Wow. That's from 55, not from 60. But still, that's pretty good. I would not say that was a touch of rear end kick out there. Still seems like a problem with the brake distribution. This is a big issue. This became a major lawsuit for GM. And apparently it was a pretty simple fix. They just wouldn't do it. For the time, however, without anti-lock brakes and everything else, that's not unusual. This is 83, right? That's not terribly unusual. So in a panic stop where you get just a little kick out at the end, well, at the time you knew how to correct for that. We were trained for that. We practiced it and it happened, so we knew how to deal with it. Overall, really good. And I'd like to say, I don't know if they're going to show any more about it, through the slalom, really tidy. I talk on this channel about watching cars and whether they lean and wallow, even if they get the numbers, even if they do the miles per hour through the slalom. How does it look? And that was super, super tidy. Really quite impressive, actually.
But since no car is perfect, it would only be fair to point out the other side of the X11 coin. The engine compartment is still cramped, and service of the V6's rear plugs still a nightmare. In addition, the air pump pulley wobbled off its mounting and through a belt. On the other hand, access to the oil filter is much better, as are the checkpoints for all the other bodily fluids. On the inside, more mixed blessings, although we generally think it's first rate. Comfortable, optional bucket seats provided good support and were only a little flat. The dash and door panels are covered in understated fabrics that continue the semi-serious tone of the car, and not even a hint of plastic wood anywhere. Other details include, again, an optional instrument cluster that's a model of design except for the overly small tachometer. One other small complaint, the climate controls and vertical radio are cramped, a design that's been corrected on other GM front-wheelers. But the businesslike console and long throw shifter made power control fall neatly into hand, even if front-wheel intrusion means that the pedals are mounted too far to the right for comfortable driver operation. But for everybody else, there's plenty of room. First, the temporary spare is mounted under the large cargo floor, where it won't take up any additional space.
Before they move on, interior. I want to like it. I really do. Again, keeping in mind this is 83, and this is an economy car, there's not a lot wrong here. You know, the armrest, the seats, where the gear shift is, the area in front of the passenger, all that's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of that. It's the gauge cluster. To me, that looks like when GM went away from the horizontal speedometer, where it sweeps across like this, they suddenly didn't know what to do. Instead of having a tachometer and a speedometer and small gauges on each side and extending it or putting it over, they just took the same general squared off look and squeezed everything in there, including in the Citation, the HVAC and a vertical radio. It seems half-hearted to me. I'm willing to bet that if you talk to designers at the time, they were like, we were really being forward-thinking. But to me, it just looks half-hearted. I don't love the area in front of the driver. Everything else is good.
And if you don't take advantage of the generous rear seat room and fold it flat, there's enough luggage space for several times our standard set of 4 bags. The X11 is so roomy, it's more like a sports wagon than a hatchback. On the exterior, we can't fail to mention the slick-looking cast wheels, front air dam, and rear spoiler, or the fine quality of the body fit and paint finish. In our opinion, also comparable to the majority of competition, foreign or domestic.
Wow. That's really a powerful comment. Interior-wise, I would never want a 2-door version of this. But I love the hatchback. I really do. I love hatchbacks and their flexibility. Honestly, if we went back to 1983 and I was let's say getting started in life and needed a car, this would really appeal to me. Not this version specifically. I'd get the 4-cylinder, but this would really appeal to me. It's American and a very, very well rated, and I think it's an extremely handsome design. I really do. Proportions are a little weird. It seems a little high off the tires, but overall, I love it. I really do. I think it's better looking than the K cars. I think it's, honestly, better looking than what Toyota or Honda was doing. And for them to say that the paint was comparable to anything foreign or domestic, that's really, really high praise. There was, when the Accord came out, it had such a high level of finish on the paint. It compared with expensive cars from Germany, and the American manufacturers couldn't even match it. In fact, regulations in California prevented them from using products that would have allowed them to match what the Japanese were doing. So that's really, really high praise. It's minor, but very high praise.
In normal living with the X11, you'll also find more positives than negatives. Despite the stiffer suspension, the ride is smooth, plus quiet. We haven't seen many sporty cars with a sound level reading below the Citation 69 decibels at 55 miles per hour. But you do pay some penalty for all this fun in mileage. Although the EPA rates the X11 at 21 city, 34 highway, we managed only 21 over our mostly urban 100-mile test loop. We did expect at least 25. However, in a sports-minded group such as ours, individual comments were bound to be most interesting.
You know, 15 years ago, the 327 Nova was king of the economy supercars. Now the X11 is heir to that throne. And with its balance of handling and power, I'd call it son of supersport.
Obviously, we like the Citation X11, despite a bevy of small faults. At around $10,000 for a reasonably equipped car, I still think its now slightly aged design is highly viable. And with similar high-performance versions offered by Pontiac, Buick, and Olds, it's clear that it will take more than a bit of bad press to extract the X car from our suburban hearts, minds, and carports.
No, it was more than a bit of bad press. This car was, my humble opinion, horrific. It really was in every respect, from brakes to, I think it was transmission fluid leaking that caused fires, to rusting, to everything about it. But they got it sorted as the years went by. And 83, I like how they say it's slightly dated, but I still think it's a handsome car. And as someone who wants to support an American manufacturer, and someone who back then absolutely supported American manufacturers, this would have very much appealed to me. I still think it's a pretty handsome car. If you disagree, I understand. I really do. But I think it's really good looking. I think it's better looking than the Accords at the time. Maybe not as delicate, as refined, but very, very good looking. This car is honestly one of the great sadness of the early 80s to me. There's so many mistakes. There's so much the Japanese were doing and the Germans were doing versus what the Americans were stumbling their way through. And this car is so sad to me because it could have been historic. It really could have. It was a absolute swing for the fences home run by GM. And they were going to produce this car that went through all their divisions, and it was going to challenge the Accord directly. And it ended up just being a constant failure. No matter how you looked at it, no matter how you turned, other than maybe raw performance, the Accord was better. And if you got one that wasn't dangerous and was bolted together and didn't catch on fire and didn't spin into a ditch, the Accord was still better other than sheer power. I like this car. I really do. For $10,000, heck, I'd buy one right now for that price. And it just makes me sad. But that was a very strong review, because nothing they said was really negative. It wasn't over the top positive, but it was a solid car with a lot of space and good performance, decent gas mileage. Would have been interested to see a 4-cylinder version. And I'm curious how slow a 4-cylinder with an automatic would be in their test. But put that thing in a 4-door, suddenly you've got something I think I would really enjoy driving because it would be cost efficient. And again, if we're putting ourselves in this mental game of going back to then, I wasn't really into the Japanese or the Germans yet. So I don't think I would have considered something like a Golf or an Accord or a Camry or whatever else was available. This would have appealed to me. Let me know what you think below, guys. I'm pretty positive about this one and how it was reviewed, because they worked out most of the problems. They ended up with something pretty solid. of course, right before they canceled it. Thanks for being here.